Everybody, and welcome to the CIP call today. Dan Ott is now going to be able to join us for the first 30 minutes, and as he said in his email, it's a bit of a light schedule for today, but what we're trying to identify are things that utilities would be doing in terms of assessments and improvements. So Kansas City just went through the assessments of for the processes and for technology, which is kind of a single spreadsheet. I received their comments, very thoughtful and thorough comments. So we're going to go through that. If Dan Ott manages to get out of his meeting and join us, he could say a little bit more about it today. Otherwise, perhaps next week. But they found the assessments useful, and they felt that it would have been useful to do it before they actually did the business process modeling and before they entered into designing the to-be state, that it would have been helpful.
You know, that's very interesting. Because as we were going through the presentations, and obviously with the asset onboarding that we've selected, we intend to do that. But I was picturing doing exactly that, is using the tool and obviously the other tools to create the business process. And what the Noemi's here and can talk more about it, but the undertaking that we're going through is pretty massive. We have many what I'm going to call sub procedures or business processes that we can perhaps use the assessment tool on now, but again, all of it needs to be formatted properly. So
well, yeah, and I think that Dan found, and he could talk about it, and Scott read Dan's notes as well, which were fairly thorough, and so he has made some recommendations in terms of simplifying some things. So I intend to do that. And one of the things that I'm considering, and I'll ping Jenny to let me know what she thinks about this. Originally, the people assessment, because that's the one that is confidential. So it was set up using Microsoft Forms and then using Power BI to look at the results. What I'm wondering now is, and maybe Jen is the wrong person because she's very proficient at these tools, analytics and Power BI and Tableau and all that. But I'm wondering whether including more analytics in a spreadsheet would be easier to disseminate and for people to manage than for me to push them into Power BI. So I don't know, Jenny, if you have any thoughts on that.
Sorry, not really. I think it just depends on what the process is for getting that analytics back to the customer. So if they're relying on you to run something in Power BI, then it might be better to have it embedded in the document versus, because I think it just depends on that gap of if you complete the analysis, how long are you waiting to get those results back?
Yeah, and I think that my thought was to set it up so that there's a section on the where the questions are, or the statements and things that will be worked out in the workshops, and then there are worksheets that would include the dashboards that would be locked up, meaning that that'd be locked. So I have a start on that, and just disseminating and distributing something that they have to then connect Power BI to, it seems like it would be a little bit of a heavy lift for some of the utilities. And I thought I may not have all the functionality of Power BI. It's not going to be maybe quite as fancy as those slicers and all that stuff, but would be easier to manage, at least initially. And then the way Microsoft doesn't make it as easy to disseminate stuff that Power BI as it is for and even Microsoft Forms, not very easy to I have to set up a separate SharePoint site for each utility and then share just that. So it's quite a bit of work to do that. A spreadsheet is so easy to share, put it on OneDrive, put it on SharePoint, wherever, and so I'm thinking about just pulling back a little bit from using Power BI. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Would it help if I showed you what kind of dashboards I'm thinking about using? Would that be helpful, or do you remember this from last time? Okay, let me know. Raise your hand if you remember it from last time, and this would be repetitious and boring for you. Raise your hand. Okay, nobody's raising their hand.
Well played, Cello. Well played.
Brian.
Yeah, no, I was about to raise my hand. I was looking for the tool. I'm used to using Zoom over.
Okay.
But no, I do remember. But I'm trying to. I'm not sure. I guess I'd actually rather, since Noemi's leading our effort, I'd rather her speak up on this one.
Unfortunately, I don't remember. Sorry. Good morning, everyone.
So Cello, from our perspective, then let's go through your example.
Yeah, I'll just briefly show just what the dashboard's going to look like for the processes and for a technology. And let me just open this up and see what is the proper. Okay. Let me know if is this readable at all, or do I need to zoom in?
Zoom in a bit, please.
Okay. This better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so the dashboard, at least this version of the dashboard currently, there's one for the business process side, which summarizes the questions here, that summarizes the results. And so, and it has them color coded based on, from 1 to 5. This is the impact of the business process on different components, such as levels of service, regulatory compliance, and so forth. So this is sort of like the overall dashboard for the business process evaluation here as well. And then there's also one for technology, where this is just the navigation buttons on the left side. But as you go, I'm sorry, as you move a little bit here, is this readable, or I should make it bigger? These are the questions. Is this readable, Brian?
I think it is for me.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bigger for me though would be nice.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I can make it a bit. Okay, yeah, that's good.
So these kind of blue things are things related to business requirements and business questions. So these were the questions that, or statements that were asked in the survey. So you could see the answers here. For this survey, I only identified there's a column for each of the data sets that you said were required for that business process. I just identified 2. If you had more, if you had lab data or project data, then there would be more, there would be content in these other columns as well. So basically, it would help you look at, according to the colors, where are areas that you may want to be concerned about. So this was one just kind of way to look at the overview. And these are the 3 levels. Level 1 is just collecting data and or creating data. How is, are we even collecting the data that we need? Level 2 is, how is the data organized? Is it complete? Is it missing? Is the naming convention consistent, and so forth? And level 3 is the analytical part of it. Are you using a BI tool? What kind of analytics do you need, are required, and for each of the data sets? And then you can see where your areas of risk or exposure, or maybe a little bit less maturity, where are these areas, and then kind of focus on these. And these would be conducted in workshops with, you know, the stakeholders. I'm doing this, so these are the 2 dashboards that I'm starting from, but right now, these are the dashboards, the new ones that I know this is too small. I'm trying, and this is just a working copy. I'm looking at identifying, as you can see, just for one, this is just for that, for each of the data sets. So this would be just for real-time operational data, and then below would be for the maintenance data, and then it would have the technology side on the left, and then the as is, and where do we like, you know, where would you like to improve each one of these aspects. So that is how, and you can collapse these things and expand them. So if, for example, you collapse this part, then you, so technology is on the left, and then on the right are the business process things. Is this important? If you had a BI tool, would have a, what kind of impact it would have? The maturity level, where, you know, or an impact on all the levels of service, safety, security, and all that. And then you know, the state of your business process as is and to be. So you can have, you can look at the transition from where you are and where you want to be. These things here with the numbers, these are just things that I'm, some calculations, because this is a work in progress. And I'm experimenting with a couple of ways to show things. One of them is to have this kind of diagram, the radar diagram. There would be labels on this and everything. I just have to kind of clean this up. And this is another way to show it. Let me just, so these are the types of dashboards that I had in mind. Does this, do you think this would be sufficient, or any thoughts? And what I'm trying to find out whether Excel would be sufficient for this, or you would prefer to have, you know, more sophisticated things in Power BI. Any thoughts on this?
Well,
so Cello, the colors represent you know, a scale. So the red and the pink, for example, are areas for significant improvement.
That's correct.
Would you be able to describe on Excel what kind of differences we would expect in the tool?
What kind of differences?
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to see in Excel versus what are you going to see on BI?
In Power BI, Power BI I've shown a couple of times, you know, and one of the things it would be a little bit difficult for me to find it right now, but because I have it on a different platform, but it was really ability to slice and dice, you know, the graph in a live kind of way. And I haven't done that in Excel yet, but there are some of the tools that I can try to using to get similar effect. I see that Tosha had her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think from a perspective of so many people using this, Excel might be the easier way to go just because we don't use Power BI at Tacoma Water. So that would be learning a new tool. You know, I don't know if there's paid subscriptions to that because we have different tools that we use. So I like the idea of Excel because then, you know, pretty much everybody has Excel or access to Excel and can do that. So just wanted to throw that opinion out there.
Well, that's very valuable. It was kind of along the lines of what I was thinking also, because if you didn't like these, first of all, these dashboards are going to evolve when people say, well, I'd really like to see kind of something else. And then we can start doing pivot tables and we can start doing different types of presentations. But before I launch into full scale development of these dashboards and stuff in Excel, I at least wanted to get some feedback from utilities to say, okay, yeah, we can deal with this. And in Excel, if you wanted to generate a new worksheet, you could easily do so. So does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think and I agree with her. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen any Power BI. It looks, I don't know. I was searching right now, and the graphs and things look great, but I don't know how to use it yet.
Yeah, Noemi, for us, Power BI is it's not something our IT supports, so we would, you know, it's staying in the Excel platform would probably may not cover all the bases, but it's definitely probably easier for us.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Power BI actually attaches to an Excel file. So if you actually wanted to use Power BI, what I can generate is the type of format, a worksheet that has the kind of format that you can more easily pull into Power BI. What's more difficult for me to deliver in terms of to each different utility is the pre-configured functionality within Power BI, because anytime somebody changes the spreadsheet, you would have to change the Power BI mapping, and it makes things a little bit more complicated, and it would be more limitation on what. But now if it's in Excel, you can do whatever you like, and it's not because you don't have the processing on top of it. Does that make sense, Jenny?
Makes a lot of sense to me. I agree with everything that's been said.
Okay, so I'll keep plugging away at sprucing this up. It's some of this stuff is still work in progress, and the dashboards will be locked. They will be clean. They will be cleaned up, but it's just I just wanted to have this kind of a checkpoint before I go full scale into it. So I'll just keep working in Excel. And so what our goal was also to see to check with folks and see if we're changing our kind of rhythm a little bit and trying to figure out how to really more directly support each individual utility, for example, San Francisco, exactly with the stuff that they want to do, so that we can then set up, meetings, if you'd like, or sessions with San Francisco or with Tacoma, with the program team, so that we can get each of the pilots and implementations up to speed as soon as possible, so that it's also sort of learning by doing rather than, and then, so in the next few months, we would do a little bit more doing, and then in the fall, we would be doing a little bit more sharing like we've done before. Any thoughts on this? Does this work for you guys?
That sounds awesome to me. I already started with a little bit of, like you recommended. I started with implementing the asset, the commissioning assets. Actually, I didn't start with asset onboarding. Then yes, I think I need a little bit of hand holding for the rest of the, this tool that you're presenting right now, for sure.
Yeah, and as you're building, as you're starting to build this process model, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We want to make this as easy and as quick for you as possible. It may save you some time. Mike Barnett's on the call, and he is here to help, and he will review your draft. He'll he's very keen to help out, and if I can help, I will as well. So
yeah, thank you. I will be reaching out for sure.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Deb? Oh, Jenny, sorry.
I had some questions. If I don't know, Dan's not here, but I was curious about how many people were included in the group that used the assessment tool, how large the group was and what their roles were, how many meetings, how long, kind of just those kind of questions.
I can answer some of them. I think, and Scott, if I remember the numbers incorrectly, you can remember. I think that when they conducted the people one, that they sent it out to 28 people and received 11 results. It was 40%. That's on the people side of things. On the process and technology, they decided not to engage in meetings, but what they did is they put together a smaller core team that had 3 or 4 people, and they went through it carefully to kind of look at it and see how it would play. Their situation is that they have already developed a fairly solid business process model of their already of the process that they're looking at. So for them, it was an interesting situation because they have already done the process modeling, and now they're looking the preparatory side of it, and they found that it was useful. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
So it was, you said that for the people side of things, it was like a questionnaire kind of thing, and they got answers through emails, maybe?
No, the way that works is, and I can explain. I have a bunch of slides on this, but I can tell you how this works. It's a Microsoft Forms, and I worked with them to set up. What we did is, I set up a SharePoint site specifically for Kansas City Water, and then because we don't want to, because it's kind of confidential and stuff like that. So we want, if, for example, you wanted to do the people assessment, organizational culture and workforce, let's talk about setting up a SharePoint where you can have your forms, you can have your responses, and then they would not be shared with other utilities. It would be just your space. And I have also, and this would be for tier 1, which is 18 questions, and then also forms for tier 2. If some of the categories, did not score so well in your tier 1 assessment, then you could follow up with the tier 2 question just for that category. For example, if you notice that in teamwork and collaboration, the scores were low, you could just follow up just on that. So if you wanted to conduct those things, let's talk, and I'll set up a SharePoint site. We'll build the forms. You'll see how you'll see how to do it. We can even build it together. I can build it for you. However you'd like to do this, whatever makes you comfortable. But they would be confidential, just for your utility.
Just okay. Dan is the best one to really comment on this, but the pilot test that he did was very informative in a bunch of ways. On the people side, there were some where there was complete consensus that on the different questions. There were some where it was a little mixed, and it did allow them to say, here are 3 areas we want to focus on, and where we that for improvement. So I think that in general it seemed to work. The participation rate was a problem because they only got 40% participation among the stakeholders, but in terms of the results, it did give some good information. I think that Brian already brought up the question of sequencing. They started in already having a to-be process, basically, and so doing the assessment was a little odd, and it would have been better in their view to do it up front, just like Brian was talking about. So that was one of the outcomes. And I'd say that there was a kind of a question of which we talked about here. To what extent do you use a core team, let's say, to do some of the questions versus the larger group? And it may be that, one possible suggestion is that when you do the as is business process, that you do it with a core team to describe what the process is, but then on the 2B, you're more inclusive. They were coming in later on down the line, so it was not necessarily your situation. I also think that the conversation that you guys had on Excel is more adaptable, so that you can basically tweak some of the questions, or you could. Another one of their comments was, well, there was maybe 1 or 2 of the questions that they didn't really think were needed in their case, but you could select which ones you want and kind of go from there. There were some questions about the reporting tools that we've talked about here, and Cello's working on that. So it sounded, or it looked like, because Dan's not on the line now, that it was real useful, and they learned a lot, and they had some good suggestions that Cello can follow up on.
Yeah, and it is work in progress. So as you try it out, we can talk about how to improve it. One sort of thing that, the yin and the yang is the black and the white thing, is that if we adjust the way if each utility uses different types of questions and stuff like that, it can be more specific for that utility, but it's going to be more difficult to then compare things across different utilities later if you would like to do that. So if we can find through these pilots what are the things that everybody agrees on, so that as much as possible, so that we can have some sort of sharing and examination and possibly learning by comparing results from different utilities, if they have the same statements and questions and the same ratings and stuff, it would be a little bit easier to do. So it's a balancing act when it comes to that.
And that might be particularly important on the people questions, because in the business processes and technology, there are, can be some unique aspects in the utility, but these questions that were developed for the statements for the people, the team spent over a year coming up with them, trying to figure out what were some good standard ones to use.
Okay, so let's see, are there any questions that you have or thoughts for today's meeting? Any thoughts, questions? Okay, if not, what, yes, Scott.
Well, I'm just going to mention, and this is almost a side note, because Kansas City didn't look at it, and it's still a little under development, but it's getting there, is there's also a readiness assessment. So that, for example, if Brian in San Francisco or others are kind of starting with the typical process where you do the people, process, technology, and you do the as is and the to be process, then there's a readiness assessment or a maturity assessment in terms of change management, in terms of being ready to move forward, which is kind of a double check at the end to say, have we covered all the bases and are we ready to go with the improvements? So they didn't do that because they've already implemented the improvements, but or they've already pretty much designed them. They may look at change readiness after they finish with all the improvement work plan that they have to do. But anyway, that was just another thing that's part of the model and the process.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that. I don't want to have overkill from all these colors and things. I'll just briefly show what the dashboard looks like for change management. And is this visible, or should I zoom in?
A little zoom in. Yeah, there you go. Let's see it.
So these are the how should I say, categories, 5 categories: communication, feedback, change process, employee skills and capacity, executing change. These, and then there are 5 questions. Questions are these, and these are the results as people, how people responded. This is not where you would respond. This is just like an overall dashboard kind of thing. And again, it's a Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Each of the statements is, each statement is positive, so that strongly agree is really good and strongly disagree is really bad. The way these answers I provided are random, so this doesn't mean anything. I just was testing and I wanted to try one of each to see that my formatting is working properly. But this is something that can be used to kind of judge what kind of risks or challenges we might have as we try to implement these changes. And I'd be happy to, again, work with folks who want to implement this. When I say I, what I mean, we, the project team, would be happy to. Let me see, this would be easier for you to see if I do it like this. It's so the point being that we want to make sure that you get the support that you need and that we can guide you through this. This spreadsheet is in reasonably good shape, and also we'll be doing some dashboards as well. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. So just in conclusion, if you plan to, or when you plan to go out and start using these assessments, or you want to go start doing business process modeling, please reach out to us, because we want to make sure that we make, you know, that ramp not quite so steep, and help you in those efforts.
So Chelo, I have a question. You know, before you start doing this, you have to prepare all this. Is this already prepared for us, and you have to set up meetings or set up the SharePoint page, for example?
Okay.
All that.
If you want, SharePoint comes into play if you want to do the people assessment, because the people assessment does not work off a spreadsheet because it has to be confidential. It works off Microsoft Forms, which means that forms would be emailed, but there would be they would be confidential. You wouldn't be able to see who responded to which form.
I see.
So if you want to do the workforce and organizational culture assessment, we would set up a SharePoint that would be just for you. As far as assessment for process and technology, their spreadsheet, we can put them anywhere. You don't, since we're not using Power BI, it's a lot easier. So I don't even need to set up a SharePoint site. You can put it wherever you'd like.
Okay. But there is some preparatory work that you have to do before you do
yes,
the assessments.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I would say if you're considering more than one process, it may not be bad to have a conversation and just kind of, if you look at the questions on that process side is, you know, one of the questions is how many stakeholders are there? So if you go there and you find out that you have like 57 stakeholders, maybe you want to take a step back and say, is this really the first one I want to do? Or maybe I want to do something that has 10, you know, rather than, because if you pick the business process that is like everybody is involved, and then the next question is it documented? If it's not documented at all, then it starts piling up. You know, then you'd say, well, do I really, if I have a business process where I don't have any metrics defined, it's not documented, I have, you know, 102 stakeholders, it has critical impact, maybe we want to do the pilot on something that's a little bit smaller and risky, and select a sub process, and then kind of practice, you know, kind of get your not select something that will be too difficult as for the first try. Okay. I wouldn't, you know, for example, Baltimore is thinking about procurement, and what we will be trying to convince them is, don't do the entire procurement, because it'll be, I know that everybody wants to improve it, but let's take a smaller example. And Duncan is on the call, and Duncan can attest that even, you know, they focused on the CIP side only on business case evaluation, and even that was not such an easy lift, right, Duncan?
Yes, it's you all know, the like business, even business case evaluation has its own sub steps up to maybe 6 or 7 steps, but the whole CIP may be like 30 steps, including all the stakeholders that are involved. Yes, I agree that it's always good to start with a sub steps within a bigger process. Then you see how you go with that one, how easy it is to improve or to come up with essays and what you want to improve in future. Then maybe you can expand it with different stakeholders at a later date. But I would suggest starting small with maybe fewer than 20 stakeholders, or even 20 might be a big number. Then
yeah, exactly. Because even if you realistically, even to set up a workshop or a meeting with 20 people, it's just setting up a meeting is going to be so. Just kind of since it's the first time, just make sure that it's not too big and too complex, so you don't get frustrated.
Just to comment on Noemi's, kind of inquiry, preliminary planning, doing the planning for this is important, and making sure that you do that upfront work. And as Cello said, the project team's available to make sure that you're familiar with the tools, the process, and all aspects of it, so that you're prepared to facilitate a group through the process. And that's real important to get that right up front, and not just have people show up and start in. So that's spending that time. But and there's a couple people on the line who've done that on the call. I see Deb has dropped off, but we had a good session with her, for example, looking at a specific part of the CIP of the process, and doing that upfront work is very important.
Okay.
I'll just share if it's helpful, because
Sure.
I haven't done the work yet, but that's my plan. So part of my plan was I went through the tool with Cello one-on-one and kind of put my notes together about the 2 business processes I'm going to recommend Tacoma Water does. And then I'm bringing it to my supervisor to say, here's what this tool can do for us and help us understand our current state before we map it out, so we understand the scope and impact and the goals of why we're doing this business process improvement. And then I plan to schedule time with a small group. So it was helpful to hear that's what Dan did, because I'm doing 2 business processes. So with that small group, just setting up one-on-ones with them to go over the tool as well before we meet together as a group, to then actually use it. So they can think about, before we meet, who are the stakeholders in this process? What does it mean when we talk about documentation and what we're looking for? So just in my continuous improvement world, so many folks at this point really want to jump to that future state, and it's really hard to get focused on, we just want to understand the current state. And even if it's not documented, that's the whole point of this assessment. As I hear all the time, well, we don't have a business process, it's not documented. That's the goal of this tool, is to really understand your current state as it is. And so I think it's helpful to do that upfront work to prepare your group of what to expect. That we're not solutioning in this session. We're not talking about all the problems yet. We're just trying to really identify the characteristics of the current state. So that's my plan, and my hope is to do just a 2-hour meeting per business process. And it's just no more than 2 hours per business process to go through the assessment tool, so we can quickly get to, okay, now that we've done this, let's map out in that BPMN what the current state is.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Okay, so in the next few days, in the next couple of weeks, whatever questions you have, please don't hesitate to ping us, to reach out, and we'll do everything we can to support you. Unfortunately, Dan was pulled in a different direction. He called me just before this meeting, so I'm going to stop the recording. And any final thoughts before we complete the meeting?